Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Author Stories podcast. My very special guest this week is author Lesley Smith. I started to say good morning, good day to you, and welcome to the show, Lesley.
Thank you for having me. I think technically it's still morning. It depends on where you are these days, but yeah, it's not here, so...
To give it, as everyone can figure out by now, Lesley and I have very different accents, and we are across the Atlantic Ocean from one another, and so we have a bit of a time difference. But thank you so much for coming on the show. You have a lot of fascinating things about you that I really want to get into. But as we get started, why don't you just tell the audience a little bit about you and how you became a writer?
Well, I think like everybody else, I kind of just fell into it because, it's something you do for fun. And then kind of, Kindle happened and suddenly self-publishing became, the cool thing to do rather than the sort of, vanity side that was sort of prevalent 10 years ago. I started off as, my background is basically I was a journalist for nearly a decade. So I started off writing, the interviews and articles and the boring stuff in a kind of interesting manner. And it's sort of got to the point where it was very easy to make that jump from writing sort of non-fiction pieces to doing fiction. It's a lot more fun as well.
What sort of fiction do you like? And when you started, you say it was sort of easy to make that jump.
Yeah.
Was there something in that you have always? A lot of people have a story that they've kind of always carried around in their mind with them. Was there one of those that eventually you just had to get it out?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I've always been writing, but I think part of what I did, when you're a freelance journalist, you tend to have areas that you specialise in because that's how you get paid. People want people who can write about weird, obscure subjects that, occasionally sort of come into the sort of mainstream consciousness, but not all the time. And the best way to make money is to have 4 or 5 of these kind of nicely lined up so you can kind of go, yep, I can do that, or I can do that one. And part of what I ended up doing, I started off doing technology and Japanese culture and anime and manga and computer games. And towards the kind of end of my journalistic career, I started doing a lot of books and movies and TV stuff. And the nice thing about the book side was I would always be sent large boxes of books by all these nice publishing folk that I didn't read and occasionally review for various publications. And it was nice because I actually got to learn a bit about the publishing industry while I was doing it. And at the same time, I'd usually sort of get copies of books that weren't out for 6 months. And it was this nice thrill of being able to sort of talk to the authors, find out how they did this, how the books were created, and how the cover art, how everything worked. And it was just this really amazing process. And this was sort of, just before self-publishing kind of reared its head. And, traditional publishing was the only way to do it. And it just really got me interested, especially as I then found a couple of authors that, really, really liked. And they sort of served as role models for, how to do things and how to do things well. And, this could be anything as simple as just producing content to actually how to, write a really good book and not let sort of big publishers tell you what to write or what scenes to remove or what sort of genres you need to pander to.
What was that first story, the first fiction story that you wrote and published?
Let me see. Oh god. To be honest with you, I did a bit of kind of self-publishing stuff just before I kind of knuckled down and realised I needed to do it properly. None of them are particularly worth mentioning. And if I ever get the chance to go back in time, I will go and expunge my record up until the point at about kind of that I launched my debut novel and just go, it started then. But if you go and look on Amazon, there's a couple of entries. I tried doing serial fiction, which is all Hugh Howey's fault. Because I started reading Wool, and I don't know when I first became aware of Hugh. I know it was through Wool, and I think it probably was about the time it released in the UK, and it was just this huge phenomenon. And so I picked it up, read it on my iPad, and I just kind of got hooked. And it was just this idea that, you could take something that you'd written, publish it within 10 minutes, and, if you were very lucky, people might actually read it. And even better, they might actually buy it and then tell their friends who also buy copies.
Right. Are you still doing any freelance journalism?
I dabble occasionally, but I don't don't do paid stuff. I've kind of retired from the industry. I will occasionally, I blog quite religiously, which keeps me in the kind of the sort of habit that you need to write sort of more journalistic pieces. But at the same time, I kind of burnt out. You can only write in an industry, I think, for a certain amount of time before it gets icky and horrible, and it's the recession didn't help, and I think a lot of it was simply that, now with everyone having the internet and everyone wanting to be and do the cool stuff, for every paid journalist you've got 3 or 4 interns sitting behind you who will go, oh, we'll do it for free, we'll do it badly, but we'll do it for free. So it's kind of, I took myself out of the rat race, to be honest with you, and I'm glad I did it.
I understand. You talked about serial fiction. What was your foray into serial fiction?
Do you mean that I wrote or that I read?
Yes, that you wrote.
I started writing something called the Carry-On Files. It was basically zombies and plagues and, the tropes. But it was fun because it was my first real kind of just like, let's see if I can do this. I think I did about 2 parts and I've got a third one sitting on my computer. And I think given the opportunity, I will rework it at some point into something larger. But it was just a chance to play around with this new medium and being able to then sort of do a really crappy cover, which I did myself. And considering my Photoshop skills are not exactly sort of brilliant, it's still kind of something of an achievement. But at the same time, it was just this idea that, if you plan ahead in advance enough and get something rolling, you can actually sort of keep serial fiction going. And I think the general sort of digestion of fiction has changed. We used to be all for kind of Stephen King and epics and whatnot, but now some people want something every week, and then the rest of us want sort of box set type things we can binge on. And it's walking a very sort of interesting line, and I'm quite curious to see how it's going to pan out, because I know a lot of people who've released their own work as a serial and then kind of omnibused it at the end.
Yeah, I had the idea to do a serial and then omnibus it at the end, and I changed my mind halfway through because I wanted to keep changing the beginning of the story.
Yes, that's a slight issue.
Yeah, that's a slight issue, and maybe I'll tackle it again one day. But I just, I'm still trying to figure out some of the issues with that. But
I think you've got to have a lot of planning and a lot of kind of. It's not just I'll do this week. You've got to actually really have a schedule, and I think in some ways it's slightly less forgiving than if you were just wanting to publish a novel every 6 months. Which is kind of where I've kind of sat myself. I can't quite sustain the ability to do a sort of season of something from a financial or time-wise thing. So I'm kind of cheating by going, right, you can have a really long novel once every 6 months. Is that okay? Good.
Yeah. Well, you've been involved in a couple of box sets, and there's a big group that's coming out soon that there's a little bit of news starting to leak out about. Would you like to talk a little bit about some of these big...
I'm pretty sure I can without getting too yelled at. I'm part of an anthology called Tales of Pennsylvania, which is coming out next week.
Which is available for pre-order now.
It is, and you should totally pick it up because, seriously, it's really nice, and I'm completely biased, of course.
But there's every author that I look up to has a story in that.
Exactly. Every author that you've podcasted has a story in it.
Absolutely, yeah. That's great.
No, it's been awesome. I've never done an anthology before, and I just kind of got poked and sort of said, do you want to do this? And it's like, yeah. Because when the beard comes up to you and says, do you want to do something? You don't go, well, I'll think about it.
The beard. Amazing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
For those who, the beard is Michael Bunker's sort of, in-house nickname because it's his most notable feature.
Yes.
He kind of tapped a bunch of us, and it was really fun because a lot of the problems I have with being an author are the business side of things. I don't want to have to faff around with too much kind of the hands-on stuff, the marketing, the covers and everything else. I will do it if I have to, but I like to write, so this gave me an opportunity to just go, here, have some text, see you in 6 months. It wasn't that easy, of course. There was editing and the usual stuff to do,
sure.
and but it's nice in a way because it just we got to write a bunch of amazing different stories. And I've got an arc of tales on my iPad, and it really is good. And the people that they've got to do the other stories, they're all people I read. And we're all kind of like this little coterie of folks who just kind of go, yeah, we were writing cool stuff. And I've never written fan fiction before either, not like, proper licensed,
Right.
okay fan fiction.
When
And it's nice because it's becoming very much a mainstream thing now. And, Michael's created this amazing world. And it was just so nice to be able to go, right, I don't really know much about this, so I'm just going to go and, create my little corner over here and hope it pans out.
well, that's it's a great issue because and that's something I wanted to talk to you about writing in the Pennsylvania universe. And I've talked to several other people that are doing this new licensed fan fiction
Yeah.
for better for lack of a better term. But what is it like writing in someone else's universe? And I talked to Chris Porteau about this.
Yeah.
You have these huge books that we're going to get into in a minute, that in this world that you have fully realized, and you are building a world of your own, but then to get pulled into someone else's world, what's the difference in that? How different is it to switch gears and to get in someone else's head, so to speak?
You know that moment on a roller coaster where you're just about to dip over the top and
Yes.
you're kind of, can I get off now, please? That. I mean, it's not
Totally
too bad.
that.
I have, because of how I'm wired, I just live with imposter syndrome, and I'm constantly convinced that people are going to, no, that's wrong. You've done this the wrong way around, or this term's wrong, or well, what planet are you on over here?
Lesley, we all live with imposter
I
syndrome.
know, it's this horrible terror that, and this is why I was very careful to kind of carve out my own corner. My piece at the farm at Hannibal is basically set in the city. The bits that you kind of got to see in Pennsylvania, but you didn't kind of focus on very much. And I just looked at that and thought, yeah, this could do with nicely being fleshed out. And it's almost a way of colouring within the lines, I suppose. You're within a certain world, but you've got a bit of autonomy and you've got sort of interpretation there. And it was enough to be able to go, right, I can actually do this. I'm not going to get told off. I'm not going to get, tarred and feathered by a bunch of very annoyed sort of, Michael Bunker fans who are going to come after me. The sort of the large ocean between you guys and me has suddenly become very kind of useful, and it's my barrier.
That's great. I have an advanced reader copy of Tales from Pennsylvania, and
It's funny enough.
and it's
very good, isn't it?
well, it's excellent. And your story, I was browsing through last night, is excellent. And the thing that amazed me is I read Pennsylvania a few months ago and loved it. But then to look at these other people's contributions to that world, and some of the stories are definitely not stories that Bunker himself would have told. But because he allowed other people into that world, the world is bigger and more fully realized. And
it seems more realistic and
it
more
does.
authentic.
It
I
does.
like
It's really an amazing process.
Yeah, you get this thing where you get all these different people with different worldviews and different sort of areas of specialty and a preferred kind of genre, and you put them all together. And it was really interesting to just see some, because I didn't see a lot. I saw a couple of the stories before the book was published, or before it came into the kind of advanced reader copy stage. And it was really interesting because, you looked at them and they were like, they all fit, but at the same time, quite a few of them could easily stand on their own 2 feet. And, I was just stunned because I was terrified when I submitted my particular story that, it was going to go like, what the heck are you writing here? And, to have sort of Michael then come up to me and say that I really need to sort of write a novel out of this, in that kind of, you are criminally insane if you don't do this kind of way, hint, hint, get on with it kind of thing. It was just kind of, it was amazing. And I met some really great people as well from doing it. It's, it kind of bonds you, I suppose. And, especially as a lot of us are also involved in this other sort of not as secret project thing. It's kind of just made it easier because we're all working together and we all know each other already.
So to shift gears a little bit
Yes.
and talk about your work, uh, apart from your contribution to the Pennsylvania world, you did you published a novel. I think it was last year when you did your
Uh,
first Kickstarter.
Technically, yeah, the first Kickstarter was this February, just gone,
Okay.
and the book came out in just October. So it's oh god, it's coming to the end of the year again, isn't it?
It is. It is.
It just feels like time is sort of running by and going, well, you haven't written stuff yet. Get on with it.
I I totally commiserate with you on that. But what was the first off? Tell us about the story that that first Kickstarter was based around, and how did you come up with the idea for the story, and why did you decide to kickstart it?
Well, I liked the idea of Kickstarter purely from a financial point of view. I'm visually impaired. I'm sort of semi-retired, as I've already mentioned, and when you're sort of got multiple physical and whatnot disabilities, it does make life a tiny bit difficult. I haven't got the energy or the kind of coherence to be able to just sort of go out and work 40 hours a week. As much as I kind of would like to, it would probably kill me quite quickly. So it's kind of, at the moment, over here at least, the job market isn't exactly sort of fruitful and, a good place to be. So I thought I've looked at Kickstarter and I've seen quite a few other authors that I respect who have sort of been embracing crowdfunding. And purely from a financial sort of way, it made really logical sense because, for sort of essentially pre-ordering copies of the book, I'd get an instant sort of, fan base of people who wanted to read it, or at least cared enough to kind of download the ebook sort of version. And at the same time, I got the financial sort of backing I needed to be able to then go and do something well and make a really nice book. And seriously, it's so pretty. I just keep looking at the book, even sort of 3 months after getting copies of it and being sick of it. I look at it and go, yep, I am quite proud of this.
And that was the Changing of the Sun, is that right?
That was. I actually started writing that sort of, I think it was probably about sort of June, July last year. I just finished doing Camp Nano. I do that sort of 3 times a year minimum. I tend to do it at least every other month by sheer habit of writing, because being sort of, retired, I have a lot of time and I fill it by writing, and I should probably produce double what I actually do, but, we're working on that. And I'd finished doing camp and I wanted to do anything apart from what I'd actually just been writing. So I just started writing this other story that was connected to the one I just finished and sort of provided the backbones. And then suddenly, it was February and I'd nearly finished it and I was starting to think about actually publishing. And I wanted Jason and, I wanted to be able to do this well. And so I basically stole Hugh Howey's entire creative team and went, right, help me make a book.
And where did the idea for the story come from? This is a trilogy, is that right? It's just
Yeah, it is a trilogy. I kind of, it sounds silly, but I mean the idea itself. I'm very much a proponent that stories tell themselves, and writers essentially just kind of sit there like the oracles of old, just kind of relaying stuff that sort of floats out of the ether. But the story itself, it just kind of felt like it's one of those rare things I think that nobody else could have written apart from me, which is good because I kind of like how it came out. It was an interesting one, to be honest with you, because it didn't feel like I was telling the story. It just felt like I was sitting there writing stuff and it was coming out, and it was a very organic process. That didn't take actually anywhere near as long as I thought it was, even if I gave myself permission to write really, really long books, which I won't do again because that's too long. I've kind of forgotten the question now. Do you want to try again?
What was the idea for the trilogy, and
Yes.
kind of how did you realize this
Well,
this new story and this new world that you wanted to write in?
when I was a much younger person, I used to get quite a lot of insomnia, and so I used to spend a couple of nights a month basically reading all the way through because I couldn't sleep. And one of the books I read when I was going through that was Sharon Shin's trilogy. I think they're called the Angel Files, and they were all set on this alien planet. And the bit that interested me was not the angels, because they were pretty, but it was the fact that each book was set in a very different time period on the same planet. So you started off kind of almost like, Neanderthal level, and by the end of the series, I think you were kind of like, future steampunk, techno kind of stuff. And it was this interesting transition of going and sort of getting a glimpse of a sort of civilization's evolution, being able to kind of stop at important periods and have a look and see what was going on. And that kind of stuck with me. And I didn't originally intend to do it that way, but it actually came out really quite well, because I started off with this idea that, this particular planet is about to suffer a massive solar eruption that's probably going to kill everything. And they've got a very limited amount of time to actually be able to sort of try and save themselves. And the first book is very much, it's rooted in religion, it's rooted in faith, it's rooted in kind of, blind trust that if you do something, you might actually survive. Whereas the second book is a bit more kind of, there's less talk of religion, there's slightly more talk of fact. And by the third one, we've kind of caught up to sort of, modernity almost. And it's an interesting way to sort of jump through a familiar kind of, once the world has actually been established, it's done. But I like the fact that it changes and it shifts, and yet you keep meeting the same people over and over again, and they're kind of, adapting through the ages.
Interesting. So did you have the idea for the full trilogy before you started, and did you know where the story was going to end before you started?
Yeah, I ended up starting with the third book, which was just going to be, I wrote it, ironically, we had, because we've got a monarchy over here, when they got married, it was this massive kind of like 4-day bank holiday celebration thing,
right?
Which essentially meant, there was nothing to do. There were no buses running, half the shops had shut, and there was literally just kind of, no excuse aside from getting very drunk and just going, has this finished yet? I don't really give much for the monarchy. It's kind of, we're stuck with it, can't do much about it. But it was 4 days where there was very little you could actually do aside from watch this on TV. I don't have a TV, or I could just kind of write. So I ended up doing this novella length sort of piece in 4 days just because there was nothing else to do, which is not going to happen again very often. So it's kind of, and it gave me the impression that there was a bigger story there.
It was one of those things that just came from a snapshot in time.
Yeah, I kind of was aware of it, but it was very rough and it was very crap and it needed rewriting a lot. But it was the bones were there and there was potential, and I suddenly realised that actually this wasn't the first book, this was the last one. And there was a lot more kind of history that needed to be put in place first before I could sort of, do it. So I kind of started backtracking and looking for sort of the threads that connected it and going as far back as I could. And so, yeah, we have a trilogy.
Are you I take it that you are a plotter type writer?
Yeah, most of the time, I think.
Yeah.
You have to be, because pantsing, it only takes you so far. And I've taught Nano. I was one of the liaisons last year who kind of herds people and gets them to sort of get to the 50,000 words on time.
Right.
And I know that if you pants it, you'll only get halfway. You need to have some kind of organisation and some kind of plot. But at the same time, if you just do all plotting, it's so rigid. You need to have that sort of happy place in the middle where you've got the fluid to move, but you, at the same time, you kind of have an idea of where you're going. And I like that. So, some books I will plot more than I need to, and other books I literally have just sat there and let the story tell me whatever it needs to tell me.
Yeah.
And we usually find a way out at the end, which is quite nice.
Yeah. I like to think that I'm one of those hybrid writers that sort of maps out the journey, but leaves myself room to develop characters and kind of see how they're going to react within the constraints of the path that I've set out for them. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of putting it, actually, because it's very hard to try and explain how you write to somebody that doesn't do it, and yet every other writer on the planet kind of nods their head and goes, yeah, that's kind of common sense, actually.
Right.
It's a very much a writing thing. And I like it because I think if you become too rigid, you're not going to get anywhere and you're never going to finish anything. Because you're just going to sit there and go, I really don't want to write this. And the moment that happens, then you've lost it, and that's why stuff doesn't get finished.
Yeah. Do you ever get toward the end of a writing project and not want to finish it because you don't want to wrap up the world? Has that ever
Uh,
happened to you?
Frequently, the problem for me is because I've got Asperger's, I don't really deal well with change. So I don't really like unexpected things. I don't like endings. I'm not really a great fan of starting new things either. The middle, right in the middle, is where I'm happy because that's stuff that you know what's going on, you know what's happening, it's all nice, plodding on, we're good. It's just endings. This is why I tend to write stuff that leads on to other things. Because if you're writing a series, it's not really an ending. It's just a kind of coffee break before you start the next book. And it's the same with. This is why most of my books are in the same universe because then I can get away with going. Actually, it's not really the ending. It's just kind of the sort of slight gap between this event happening or something else going on or you know. Um, so I try and avoid endings as much as possible, which it's really really good for my productivity because it just means that I just keep writing books.
Right. Now, you mentioned NaNoWriMo, and when we're recording this, we are right in the thick of
Oh, we are.
NaNoWriMo.
Yes, we are.
How long have you participated in NaNoWriMo?
Oh, I think probably about 8 years, but I only
Really?
started finishing it. Um, my big issue as a writer has been finishing stuff because of how my brain works. I'm very much all in it, and then I lose interest. Once I lose interest, I just put things aside and wait for the interest to come back again. Which means that most of the time when I've been writing stuff, I haven't actually finished it. It's just kind of been set aside and sort of left to kind of do whatever writing does when it gets put aside, basically. And then I sort of started realizing actually, yeah, I kind of need to finish things because finishing things means you can then get them edited and then get them published and you get a nice production line going.
Yeah.
Um, and the worst part, I routinely write at least 75,000 words a month. Nano doesn't even phase me to the point where I'm just like, it's going to be, that's fine, it's not a problem. And it's just like, oh no. And I remember the first few years when I'm just like, 50,000 words, you've got to be kidding.
Right.
It should be a terrifying, terrifying number for most people. I know a couple of folks who only ever do a couple of thousand words in Nano, and yet for them, that may as well be 50,000 because of the amount of effort they put in.
True.
So it's very much perspective and how you look at things, I think.
Right. What do you have? What would you say to people that have the opinion about Nano that nothing good can come out of writing that quickly and just writing to meet a number? Because
I don't
that gets thrown around this time of year a
Yeah,
lot.
I think the problem with Nano is they pitch it as, oh, write a novel in a month, and that's not what it's teaching you to do. Nano is teaching you to take time out of, I'm sure, is a very busy schedule with everyone having, lives and kids and cats and you name it. It's teaching you to go, right, I need to write a certain amount every day. It's essentially getting you into that habit, and that's what it's teaching you. Once you've done Nano once and you've learnt how to sort of take that half an hour and write your daily allowance, that is the most valuable thing. Okay, yeah, you can write a really shitty first draft in during November, but there's still going to be a couple of grains in there which are worth saving. And I've written, Changing was written during the summer Nano event. The book I'm currently writing, Parting, that was started during last year's November. It's a place where you plant things and you hope that something's going to blossom.
Yeah.
It's not. It's very much an educational thing. It's not about writing a bestseller from the off, not unless you know what you're doing.
Right.
And even then, I know a lot of authors who still use Nano as a way of just finishing off their current projects or keeping them motivated to do things.
Right.
It's a method rather than a kind of a means to an end. It's about teaching you how to make this point in your life where you can say, I'm a writer. I'm going to do this every day. I've got a habit. Because once you get into the habit, it's like running. You get this sort of ability to do it, and you don't lose it. But you've got to keep doing it, otherwise it's going to become harder and harder.
Right. And I think a lot of people misinterpret write a novel in a month to be publish a novel in a month. And it's
Yeah.
two very different things.
God, that would be a nightmare. I mean,
It would.
seriously, you can do it, but that doesn't mean you should. You know.
True.
And
Unless you're Michael Bunker and you write Hugh Howey Must Die, in a
yeah, I mean,
weekend.
I must admit, that was one of the first things that Michael suggested I read, and I laughed at it because being English, I just sat there and went, "This is written by an American." He completely admits that yes, it's obviously written by an American, but it is. You can see the fact it was written in a very short span of time, and it's just kind of like, yeah, are you sure you want this on your tombstone? I'm still surprised that Hugh didn't, do him for some kind of defamation of character in that one. For what it is, as a short work of fiction, it's hilariously funny.
Yeah.
But it is one of those things where, that if you want to do something and do it well, you need to add time into the mix. Otherwise, you're just going to come out with something that's more worthy of having your name on the front.
Yeah. So, what is your process like when uh, you get your word count down, you structure your novel beginning to end. Uh,
He sounds so organised. I'm just sitting here going. I'm a very, very bad procrastinator. I would probably get a lot more done if I wasn't connected to the internet most of the day. Unfortunately.
wouldn't we all?
Yeah, and yet the internet is so useful. There's Pinterest and Spotify and various places you can go for, adorable cat pictures and God, I really miss the age before the internet because, you could just write stuff. When I was, in my teens, I could write a 150,000 word novel in a couple of months without the internet. And now it's just kind of like, I can still do that, but the internet just seems to make it so much harder. It's just easier to sort of sit there and go, oh, just don't check Facebook, I'll just go and tweet something, That's the one thing I learned from doing Kickstarter. I spent the entire month not writing because I was so busy doing the social media promotion side of things that trying to find space to actually write anything was nearly impossible.
Yeah, and I think that is a new reality for a lot of authors is that in this day and age of connectedness and this is something that is true whether you are self-published or traditionally published, the author is expected to be their own marketing department.
Yeah.
And that is a new reality because before we started recording, you and I were talking about this kind of most of us are writers and we got into this to write, but we
Yeah.
find ourselves doing other things that are necessary to build a fan base and to connect with our readers and things that we all want to do, and things that make the world a better place now. But it takes away from writing, and then we are known as writers, but we don't have all the opportunity to write that we would like. Would you like to
Exactly.
talk about kind of that new reality and how that impacts
Yeah.
you?
I mean, I'm an introvert, which is hilariously funny when you meet my guide dog because she's the most extroverted creature on the planet. And it's just, you look at the pair of us sitting in a room and it's just like, you should be next to each other. What do you... I don't like talking to people in kind of, the physical way. And yet, Twitter and Facebook and, that's how I communicate with people. That's how I sort of talk to 9 out of 10 of the people I know because, it's so much easier than picking up a phone now. I hate picking up the phone. Skype is
Me too.
similar, but it's not quite as bad because at least you can see who's ringing it. It's this thing where you're expected to be there, and I love the ability to answer questions and to be around if people have things they want to ask me, or if they're going kind of like love your cover, who did it? Simple things like that. But at the same time, every 10 minutes you're on Facebook, and every time that damn button pings and goes, you've got one notification, and you've got to look at it, and you've got to look at it now. Oh, I could
Right.
be writing.
Right.
And I don't like marketing. I have experience of it because, I used to do journalism, so that means that you have some familiarity with publishing, with the PR side, with marketing, with being able to do it. But when you're doing it for your own stuff, it's a lot harder because you've got to actually believe what you're saying. PRs
That's
do a
right.
good job because they are literally getting paid and they're just parroting. They don't believe what they're saying. They're just saying it because it means they get paid. But you've got to have enough faith in what you're actually writing to be able to go, this is really awesome, you should check it out.
Yeah.
You need to have some kind of self-esteem, and mine's work in progress. I have a very small amount that I've built up over a very long period. So it's just kind of like it's trying to convince myself that actually, if people say that my stuff is good, and if it's someone I respect, like the Beard or one of my sort of writing colleagues or one of the people that I've read who sort of likes my work, then it's completely valid. It isn't the universe trying to convince me that I'm terrible and someone's just trying to be nice to me.
Right. Uh, what is your writing process like? When you each day or whenever do you that's the question I should ask. Do you write each and every day? Do you have
I do.
a religious habit to do that?
If I don't write, I get very cranky. I get to the point where I literally just I'm so used to doing it. I write like everyone else drinks coffee. It's that thing you do first thing in the morning. I'm very driven by stories. I'm frequently kind of noting them down last thing at night and writing them first thing in the morning. I generally tend to I have two sort of places that I write. I either write at home where it's warm, or I will go and ensconce myself in the local Starbucks where my dog has a water bowl and the baristas bring me coffee, and I get stuff done. And it's nice because if I'm out and I'm writing, I'm surrounded by people, but they leave me alone because I've got earbuds, and my dog is generally doing her thing, getting fuss, which means she leaves me alone. So it's a kind of win-win situation. Whereas if I'm at home, I've got my sort of proper rig, my two screens, and all the entertainment options I could possibly want. I can't write without music or some form of not quite white noise, but almost something to turn my part of my brain off so I can focus on the actual writing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I listen to a lot of music, I watch movies, I binge watch TV programs because it's my process, it's how I work. But at the same time, if I stopped using Facebook and probably stopped using every other social network on the planet, I'd probably get a lot more done.
Yeah, wouldn't we all? I posted something on Facebook a week or so ago that was kind of funny because it started this long conversation because I posted something about some music that I was listening to while I was writing that night. And I got more comments from people saying, "Oh my God, how do you do that? I have to have perfect silence, and all
Yeah.
that." And I thought that was hilarious because if I were sitting in perfect silence, I would think about everything but writing.
Mm.
And I don't know what it is.
There's no such thing as perfect silence, not when you've got
Well,
a yipping dog or a cat that really wants your attention.
absolutely, yes. Well, and I have 5 kids, and they all live at home.
Yep. That if you
There is no such thing as silence at my house. So yeah, I mean, I can pop my earbuds in, turn on music, and I have absolutely no problem focusing on writing. Uh, is there any particular thing that gets you in the zone to write?
um things like Breaking Bad, which is really weird. Stuff I've seen it because I have my memory is particularly good when it comes to the minutiae of stuff that people don't pay attention to. So I can probably quote like a dozen lines from a movie or the sort of bits and pieces from this is which TV episode such and such a thing happened or whatever. But I do find that if it's something that I've seen a few times, I don't have to watch it, but it's familiar enough that my brain can just kind of go, yeah, that's happening, that's good, that's fine, and I can get on with the real stuff that I'm actually doing. And I do find, especially if I'm out and about and I'm listening to music, which I do, I sort of live with it. It's almost a kind of a shield from the real world. It separates you from sort of everyone else and sort of almost says, go away, leave me alone, I'm busy, I'm doing stuff, and without being kind of, nasty and harsh about it. But yeah, I have a very long playlist of stuff that I listen to, and I like the ability to be able to make music and have a list that goes for a certain book or a certain amount of pieces. I got in a similar thread actually with Nora Jemison a couple of weeks back, and she was talking about how she used a particular song for one of the climax scenes in one of her Inheritance trilogy books. And I'm just like, that's my favourite song! Yeah, someone else does that! And she's walking through the scene and sort of giving us the mini playlist almost. And she was kind of like, right, what do you recommend for this? And I'm just like, firing off a list of just for example, trailer music seems to be really good because it's designed specifically to make you kind of go and sort of pay attention. So things like the music from the latest Hunger Games trailer or the Avengers trailer, stuff like that, that's got that swell to it that, you know, commands attention but isn't noise or, you know, head banging.
Trailer music is genius. That
I
I've not thought of that. That is,
I'm
I listen
seriously,
to a lot of soundtracks.
there is
Uh,
a huge genre now of just trade music. People like Brand X and Two Steps from Hell. They are my favourite because they do all like the amazing trailers. And trailer music, people don't listen to that. They're aware of it, but they don't realise that most of the time it's custom created to make you want to go and see the movie. You know,
you are
one of
evil.
my
You just opened up a whole new rabbit hole for me to fall
I,
down.
I will quite happily provide you with a very long list of who you need to go and pay
I would,
attention to.
I would love that.
It's this strange sort of thing because I never used to pay attention to trailer music, but now it's started being treated properly. So, you know, some of the music. I mean, Interstellar, which I haven't got around to going seeing yet. I listen to the music, and because of how my brain is, I have a very good ability to be able to identify tracks by about 5 seconds worth of music. I can't always name them, but I can usually find them. And I suddenly realised that track was the latest album from one of the Two Steps from Hell guys. I'm like, oh, brilliant! Yeah, that's it. And it's just like, you know, and it becomes very much linked with whatever the film is that, you know, it's promoting. But it's just, oh, it's so good because especially if you're writing sort of important, you know, life-changing scenes, you want stuff that's going to adequately kind of convey the importance. And you know, trailer music is awesome.
That that's amazing. I'm totally going to get into that. Uh, you're a Scrivener user, are you not?
Everyone is. I think it's written by law now that 95% have to be. When I originally jumped from Windows to Mac, my main reason for doing so, aside from being blind, was actually because I wanted to use Scrivener. Ironically, one of the folks that created it is a local boy to where I live, and he's very nice. And but I love the actual way of how it works, and it's so nice just to be able to treat everything like a large binder and just pull pages out and move them around, and it just trying to make my life easier. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those rare times where it's such an intuitive program, but it's so simple.
It is, and there are tons of features that I never use, but
Exactly.
but everyone uses it a little differently. The thing I love about it is it allows me to create an outline in my binder by creating the folders, and then I don't feel like I'm outlining. You know, I
Exactly.
get to still feel a little bit like a rebel, but have my process and my flow
Mhm.
all laid out. So do you, when you begin a project and you're outlining, so to speak, or you know you're getting your the road laid out for the book, do you go ahead and create a Scrivener project and get it all laid out in there when you begin?
Yeah, I mean, I use Scrivener and I use mainly like Pinterest for mood boards because I like that, just so I can have images that evoke certain things. And I tend to just have a single document where I'll try and sort of stick all the plot stuff. If I'm feeling really organised, I'll then sort of do like character bits and pieces, and you know, some series I will, some I won't. And I think because at the moment I'm just about sort of started on a not so super secret project for the Apocalypse Weird series. So I've been sort of using Scrivener as a place to stash websites and stuff relating to the sort of, you know, the shared sort of world experience. And it's just been a nice way to have stuff to hand so that whenever I'm out and about, I don't have to go and search for sort of third-party programs on my hard drive. I just go into Scrivener and get everything out there. It makes life easier and there's less sort of faffing and searching and reliance on the internet.
Sure. Uh, Leslie, where can people find your work online, and will you kind of give people an update on the newest Kickstarter project that you did and where that's going and kind of what's the next step in that project for you?
Okay, well, most of the time you can find me on Amazon. I have a blog, which is www.leslie-smith.co.uk. Make sure you spell it with an EY though, because otherwise you get weird American stuff. Yeah. I'm horrible to Americans. I'm really sorry. I tend to live on Twitter simply because it's simpler and it's easier. And yeah, the Kickstarter funded last week. God, that was so nail biting. I honestly don't know if I could do that again, just because of the kind of the stress.
Right.
Of I had to raise £3,000, which is about $4.5 US, I think, ish.
Yeah.
In what amounts to, I think, about 33 days. And it's just literally the stress of having to do that. Oh. But the good thing is I've got the funding in place, which means everything is now covered, and the next book in my Changing the Sun trilogy, The Parting of the Waters, it means it will be out in June. So it's nice to know that, all I've got to do now is finish it and then give it to my editor, Ellen, and get her to do her stuff. The cover's already done. The art is in progress when I managed to pin Ben down. It's that thing of, it's not about money, but it is about the stuff I can then do with it. And it's just nice to know that that's one less thing I have to worry about, rather than having to do it in sort of an all or nothing attempt in after Christmas. So it's going to be a really nice book as well, because one of the things I sort of did from the last Kickstarter, I ended up paying Ben J. Adams, who did Hugh Howey's art for Sand, out of my own pocket, because he does beautiful, beautiful artwork. And I just was like, right, I'm having you. Will you come back for the next book? And I actually made it officially a part of the kind of the costs of the project. So he's going to do some really nice sort of, I don't know what you call them. I suppose it's definitely interior art, but it's more, there's usually like a composite picture, and then each piece breaks down so that you've got something pretty to look at before you start the next book of the sort of next act of the book, if that makes sense.
Nice. Yeah. So just
Really,
sort of
really
mood-setting
nice.
illustrations.
Yeah, and it just helps, especially because there are no humans in this trilogy until like book 3.
Ah.
It just kind of helps to kind of establish the world, I think, and the alienness of it. And it's all ironically, I only considered interior art after my editor went, "What do your aliens look like?" And Ellen, being very smart, had a very good point. And it was just nice to be able to say, right, I do need a kind of frame of reference. Well, how many artists do I know? Oh, yes, Ben, there we go. He's awesome. He does beautiful artwork. And it's just I don't know much about art, and I can't draw to save my life, but I do know when something is pretty and when it evokes the right kind of emotional response. And I know that every time I look at the artwork he's done for me, I'm quietly going, this is so nice. So, hopefully he's going to completely top what he did for me for Changing with Parting. And if I'm asking very nicely, he might even come back for the final book in the trilogy. So, we have plans and afoot, and, it's all good.
Well, the new book that you're working on now from the Kickstarter was The Parting of the Waters.
Yes.
The book before that was Changing of the Sun, and
Yeah.
it is available now on
It
Amazon.
is.
So everyone should go pick up a copy of that now, and they should go
Yes, right.
pre-order the Tales from Pennsylvania, where your story is.
And eventually you should go and pre-order Parting, because while the Kickstarter has closed, the book will be out I'm hoping it'll be out for the 23rd of June.
Okay.
There's also going to be a bonus anthology, which was my thank you to my backers for being my backers and for being awesome people.
Nice.
I think I had like 81 of them in the end, which is just like, if anything makes your heart sort of bubble with pride, it's that.
Absolutely.
So that will also eventually be available at Amazon in sort of paperback. And I warn you now that these paperbacks, they are like 150,000 words. They're not for the faint of hearted. They're slightly smaller than Game of Thrones. But at the same time, I'm recommending everyone go and get it in the ebook version, simply because it's kind of, easier to hold and deal with.
150,000 words. You're talking upwards of 500 pages.
Yeah, about 600.
Closer to 600 pages.
Yeah. And this is the thing. I will never normally write books this long again, but for this one trilogy as my first kind of foray into doing fiction professionally, I wanted to tell the story, and I wanted to do it properly, and I wanted to give myself the ability to go, this is okay. These books are heavy, but it's okay. I know that 100,000 words, actually probably 75 now, is the kind of preferred length for a book. But I think, if you're going to do an epic, this is what this trilogy is. They are epics in all best ways of description. You know, and they needed to have everything spread out for the right amount of words. I didn't want to cut out arcs and scenes just because, you know, that's if I wanted to do that, I would have gone traditional publishers. You know, and I think the story works better for not being, I don't want to use the word censored, but for not being curtailed.
Right, right. Well, Lesley, it has been a real joy to talk to you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to come on the show and share some of your story and some of your work with us. I'll link up everything of yours in the show notes, and we look forward to the new stories coming out. Thank you.